Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome back to the stage Seymour Bernstein. Right at the beginning of the film, when you're working with a student, you talk about the importance of keeping an even pulse.
Yes.
The student has to keep an even pulse, which I found as the film goes along, you definitely do keep an even pulse, and you're very zen in many of your sayings. Can you talk a little bit about your life philosophy as we see it in the film? And because earlier you talked a little bit about dissonance and resolution as well.
It's one of the most difficult things to do as a musician, because when we're filled with emotion, we want to take a lot of time at certain points. And it's very important to impose holds upon the pulse. But you can't do it all the time. And there are just hierarchical points within the music at which time we inflict a pause, a kind of hush or a tender moment, as though it's too beautiful to play, we don't want to touch it. But if we do it at every moment, it dissipates the feeling of the piece. And pupils tend to do that, especially when they're musical. The more musical you are, the more you want to distort the pulse, because you want to say too much. It's like speaking. So if I would speak like this to you and make every word a sense of poetry, you see, there's no line to it. Oh yes, well, I must admit, it was very scary, you know. I hadn't played a recital in 37 years. But when Ethan was planning to make the documentary, we had a meeting in the same apartment where we met. That was a year earlier, when we had met. And when he decided to go ahead with the documentary, he said to me, "You know, I'm a member of a theater group, and most of us don't know anything about music. Would you agree to give a short recital and speak about the music to my theater friends?" Well, I turned a little white, thinking, you know, I have to go back to this again. But there was something so endearing about Ethan. You don't say no to him very easily. And I thought, I'm going to do this for him. You know, it's very interesting when the chips are down and you have a lot of nervousness in anticipation of doing something. When you think that you're going to do it for someone else, it temporarily distracts you from your own vulnerability. And that's what happened when he had asked me to do this. And of course, after I had agreed to do it, I started to practice 8 hours a day, as though I were going to make my debut. And now I came into the Steinway Rotunda, and I saw all these famous actors and actresses sitting there. And the cameras and the lights were everywhere. And I thought, oh my heavens, how am I ever going to survive this one? And it's going to be filmed for posterity. You can imagine, right? Well, Ethan came over to me, we gave each other a hug, and the most interesting thing happened. A deathly calm came over me. And I think the source of that calm was, I said to myself, there is no way that I'm going to let him down. I'm going to do my best. And I did practice. And you know, whatever we say, we're going to perform the way we practice. There's a hierarchical order of things when we're playing an instrument. Number one, we have an emotional response to music. Isn't that right? All right? So now we're dealing with our emotional world. Now, you can't just play convincingly on your emotions. You can't do anything actually in life just on your emotions. So your intellect has to come into play, and you have to be sure that your emotions are responding according to what the composer has written down, the notational marks. So that's when your intellect comes in. Now that's not enough. Your emotions and your intellect will not be enough for a convincing performance. The next step is, I have to make a physical connection to everything that I feel and think. If I feel a tender sound at the end of a phrase, there is only a particular physical choreographic movement that's going to produce that sound on the piano. If I don't know how to choreograph that sound, it's not going to come out of the piano. It'll just stay in my ear and nobody will recognize it. So, do you see what we have here? We have an integration of feeling, thinking, and physical coordination. Do you know how powerful that is? So you know what musicians do, how foolish musicians are. When they leave the piano, or they leave their instrument, whoever, or there's someone studying singing, and they do this through singing, or through acting, they walk away into the social world, and they leave that integration behind. They think it only belongs to their instrument, see, in case of a pianist. And the point of the documentary is that you take that synthesis that you worked so hard on at your instrument and you direct it into everything you do in life. When you do that, there's no separation between the musician and the person. They're one and the same. Sometimes this happens automatically, but in most cases, you have to do it consciously. And now I'm not only speaking about a musician doing this. Whatever your passion is in life, that's how it works. And I really think that if you're searching for your identity, the person you really are, it's found in whatever talent you have. And when you integrate all the poles of your being through working at your talent, you have to direct it into your life. One Sunday, that was the day after my lesson, my teacher had brought me books, and I was turning the pages, reading everything, and there was the Schubert Serenade. As soon as I played it, I burst into tears, because I was sure that I knew that piece. I can't explain it. How could I ever know that piece? I never heard music in my house before. Makes you begin to think that maybe there is something about lives before, you know? So, but I don't go into that mystical element. But that's how it felt at that moment when I discovered the Schubert Serenade. I was being played by the Schubert Serenade.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Seymour, thank you for being here.